Move to our superintendent's update.
Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to our last meeting here. The beginning of the superintendent's update is just a list of the artifacts that have been included since the last time that you met to discuss my evaluation. I believe they are the final artifacts that everyone needed to submit to you. And one of them is the subject of the presentation tonight, which is the long-range planning update and report of secondary buildings assessment of facilities. So that is simply a list. Second, you had some elementary cell phone questions from the presentation, two questions. You had elementary feedback question and bullying reduction since the cell phone Yonder implementation. So two parts. Elementary principals reported to Assistant Superintendent Farag that the cell phone and smartwatch use during the school day has been largely manageable, with very few incidents across the school at the elementary school for students using these devices during the day. Most schools simply have students keep devices in backpacks, which is aligned with with our district policy. Clear communication to families from every sector of the organization was cited as super helpful with this. And while there's some reminders or enforcement issues, largely with the smartwatches, so I'm saying this and emphasizing it to family members, if it's a temptation, perhaps smartwatches don't come to school. And those are the updates there, but no urgent concerns raised. But we certainly want parents to be aware of the smartwatch as the insidious force that could be part of the elementary school day. But right now it seems to be manageable. The second part was a question about when we implemented the day pilot for Yonder pouches, Principal Mann actually had pre-bullying survey data and post-survey data. The other middle schools do not have parallel data. So we're going to work on that and get that, but we will have our YRBS survey data, which does ask specific questions about bullying, and we can compare it from pre-policy time periods and see if there's any difference with the online data. Just an announcement that we have published a list of books around Veterans Day, which is in the fall of next year. If families would like to donate a book to elementary classrooms, we are also looking for volunteer veteran readers to come in and visit and read books to our students as part of our normal Reading to Children program. So if you're interested in either of those, the contact information and the purchase information is there. I just want to make sure everyone knows that the Transportation Office and Liam Hurley's office have followed through with the Horace Mann transition plan. So special busing has been arranged for those families at no cost. And also after school busing to the day after day program, we've been able to hand schedule those pieces so that those Horace Mann families are not further disrupted with the construction. And I think that that was a good decision. We are heading into summer hours. The last day of school is, of course, the 23rd for students and the 24th for staff. July 1 to 11 will be a soft close, which means that while staff may be working in the building, they are working to close down the building, and they will not be responsive to outside visitors. Before then and after those dates, we're all here and we're responsive to visitors and we're responsive to emails. We're just trying to give our professional administrators some time away from their computers and get the buildings cleaned out as fast as possible so that summer cleaning can begin and camps can get situated. There seems to be a sentence that was cut off here. The Family Engagement Center will be open 9 to 2 on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays here at the Ed Center throughout the summer. So should families need particular coaching, direction, language translation services, we are here to serve, and the public can simply walk in for those services. And finally, I just want to recognize Chris Walsh, who is our Newton Teachers Association leadership treasurer officially, but has been a huge part of teacher leadership here in the district. And just a little bit about Chris. She started in 2002 at Lincoln Elliott, 2 days a week as a building substitute, and dipped her toes in the water of elementary education as she transitioned from a career in law. By 2003, a year later, she was hooked and did a second year as an ISS. That's a substitute for people who are unfamiliar with our alphabet soup here. So in 2004, she was hired as a special education aide at Lincoln Elliott while she worked on her master's degree in licensure requirements and then did her student teaching there as well. In 2005, she became a class size aide for the fourth grade at Bowen, hired as a classroom teacher for fifth grade at Countryside the year after, and she spent 12 years teaching there, mostly fifth grade. And then from 2007 to 2018, as the NTA Professional Rights and Responsibilities Committee member, became the NTA treasurer, and is now the appointed second release officer for the NTA until she retires very shortly. And we just want to thank Chris for her service to the district and the profession, 23 years. She is here tonight for her work on the Elementary Joint Labor Management Working Group, which is a group that I applaud for its model for strong management and labor working together to better the lives of children and the working conditions for our staff. Chris, we would not be the district we are without you, and we are so grateful for your service. Thank you. If you want to thank.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nolan. Is there any questions, comments from members on the superintendent's update? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to.
Sorry, I had one other thing.
I'm sorry.
Just kidding. So on the table before you tonight is a memo I did send to the committee over the weekend. Just want to make sure everyone understands and the public knows, emails will go out to directly affected families, but in working in concert with the nurse leader for the district and Health and Human Services for the city of Newton, we have identified through a couple cases of chickenpox that came up recently that there are about 182 students within the schools who are not fully vaccinated and may have slipped in during the pandemic enrollment time periods when pediatrician appointments were hard to come by and vaccines were not readily available except for COVID vaccines. It was very hard to ensure that everyone had the same standard of care. You may recall that you passed a pandemic provision, COVID conditions policy for your former superintendent to make decisions like enrollment, attendance, schedules, busing, that didn't require school committee approval to do that during the pandemic. We actually still have that policy on the books, although there is no pandemic to which it refers to, so it is not in operation. So I'm going to pull it as part of our work in the policy committee next year. But those students that now are here need to become fully vaccinated in compliance with the expectations to attend in the state of Massachusetts. And I also want to say that within that group, we have now had to do further notification because measles is in the area, as you know, from news reports that have occurred. And some of the students here listed in that 182 are not vaccinated for measles. The quarantine date, if you are a close contact with someone who has had measles or has measles and you are not vaccinated, is 21 days, where students would be removed from school, and there is no obligation for us to provide compensatory services to that young person. So it's really important that should you and your family receive a letter from us this week, next week, or anytime during the summer, or anytime in September, that you respond to it and give us a call. The number and the resources will be on that letter, and we will work with Health and Human Services to ensure that you are vaccinated. Cost and access to medical care is no barrier to receiving the full vaccination. And it should be known that in September, if the student is not able to show that they have been vaccinated, they will not be matriculating into the buildings. So please note that we will do whatever we can to make sure that that doesn't happen to most students. And been speaking again with Nurse Riley today just to affirm that those letters will be going out from building principals and nurses within the next 2 days. So.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll ask if there's any questions or comments. Yep.
That sparked a comment. I appreciate the work that you and the HHS team are doing to tighten up our compliance with state vaccination law. I think that's the right call. I just want to clarify for folks who are observing or listening that you did say that cost is not a barrier or an impediment to vaccinations. And I believe from the memo, that's because HHS has a stock of the various vaccines that are.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. I want to put that out
Yeah.
there. I think that's also commendable. So thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to applaud HHS. They've just been so responsive, and it seems, short of like arriving at a person's kitchen table to give the shot, like they are ready to do whatever they need to do.
Mayor Fuller?
If I can just build on what the superintendent said, please know that families, the exemptions for specific medical situations and religious exemptions still are available to those, and you would work with the school nurse to explore those and take advantage of them if it makes sense for your family.
Yeah, I should clarify, this number is independent of religious and medical exclusions.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, let's move on to our discussion items for this evening. First up, we have an overview of district reorganizations.
We have been talking many times throughout the budget season about efficiencies and budget-driven changes within the organization. This memo has several parts to it and seeks to tell you about those reorganizations and in some cases, elimination of programs and changes to the district. There is one set of impacts and reorganizations that is not described here, and I will describe it once we are completed full impact bargaining with the Teachers Association. And that is the elimination of the 3 digital learning coordinators from Stephen Rattendi's department. We are still in the final discussion about what the impacts of that will be. Once I know that, I will come back to you with a summary there. Otherwise, what you're seeing here is the mental health working group met all year long. You have a memo about it tonight to summarize the work, as you do of all those working groups. We were able to reorganize around the Springboard program to create the BRIGHT program that is recommended for student mental health needs at both North and South High School. We fully expect that that program will continue to expand, and we were able to reorganize to implement that and partner with the Brookline Mental Health Center. So we're very excited about that change. Under elementary school multi-tiered systems of support, as you know, we have really been trying to reorganize the way that both the elementary school day runs and the support available to the classroom teacher for student intervention and extension. We were able to eliminate some substitute positions to create more literacy and math specialist support at every elementary school. And the details of what that is here. It's not more FTEs, it's just consolidating FTEs that existed and creating more Unit A specialist positions who are the most highly skilled in math and ELA to provide direct service to students and their intervention needs. The rationale is spelled out for the public and for the committee. Under teaching and learning, a reorganization occurred in order to address gaps in instruction that we have identified, barriers to implementing MTSS, to measure curriculum efficiencies and effectiveness, to deploy curriculum resources in a more equitable fashion, and to provide a cohesive professional learning system. So there was a reduction of 3 FTE, as you all know, before we started the budget process, and a reorganization here to create a director of professional learning and 5 other K-12 assistant director positions that will replace the curriculum coordination positions that were existing in the CRC, the Curriculum Resource Center. There's actually visuals of the reorganization in the memo. Human Resources was reorganized throughout the year, integrating the Office of DEI into the HR department with a focus on staff retention and creating development programs and trainings for staff, create structural alignment, tech integration, and professional support, and to allow the HR department to become modernized, efficient, and more organized. And then there was a reorganization of the METCO program. As you know, METCO was level funded for the second year in a row. That level funding means that we could not keep the same portfolio of positions with less budget. So we looked at our METCO student achievement data and designed academic support positions that we feel would better support the academic and intervention needs of those students. We also reduced the portfolio of schools that these staff have to travel to. In the current configuration, staff were traveling to 3 and 4 schools to try to address the needs of METCO students. So would we like to have METCO students at every single building? Yes, we would, but we can't scale it with support at every level. So what you're reading about there is a reduction in the number of campuses. There are some campuses that have 1 or 2 students that are still there. And so the elementary engagement specialist, who is an administrator who will serve to support all of the METCO liaisons and train them and attend meetings and respond to parent concerns, will be overseeing those stragglers who are finishing out their final years at elementary schools. So those are the major changes, and we'd like to thank our NTA partners who worked with us with speed to impact bargain these changes during a very difficult budget year and ensure that we respected the contract, but also strengthened the district operations, efficiency, and impact. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you. I know there were some questions that came in prior. Did you want to address those?
So the question on METCO was, I'm just trying to remember, was, why am I blanking on what the question was? Did you ask the question? You asked,
I think
is it
I
a
just asked if
reduction?
it was simply a reduction in
Yes.
schools, but you explained, I think just
Right.
now, that it was
I think
also a change.
yeah.
Other questions from members? Emily?
Just have a quick question and then a comment. First is, in terms of the sort of reshuffling of the Ed Center spaces,
Mhm.
especially up on the 3rd floor.
Yep.
It's not going to affect community connections.
It's not.
Okay, good. That
Correct.
was question number 1.
Mhm.
And comment number 2 is I'm very much looking forward to hearing about how the Bright program goes this coming year. I think that it is a wonderful addition. Looking at Casey right now, and I'm thrilled that we're implementing it, and we'll see how it goes in its first infancy year.
Yeah, we're very excited. We give Casey No Miller, our assistant superintendent, a lot of credit for being able to figure that out. So thank you.
Other questions? On Ping?
Under the new structure of our MPS, here looking at the flow chart, the assistant superintendent, HR, and the leadership, is this new created position or is some current?
It's using current monies. We've reorganized the Human Resources Department to be able to create that structure.
Okay, so this is totally new created assistant superintendent position.
The title.
Okay. Yeah, overall, I appreciate that you give quite some thoughts and rationale why this restructure is important and timely, and I appreciate that, understand the thinking behind these restructure decision. Thanks.
Other questions? Tamika?
So regarding the METCO consolidation program, elementary consolidation, how many schools are we consolidating into eventually? I understand that that's going to take some time to phase that into fruition, but how many is the target?
Well, it really depends what happens with the Metco budget in the coming years. So right now we're shooting for 8, but we're moving, I'm worried that we're moving in the wrong direction on the Metco funding at the state level. It's not a Newton issue. Everyone has had a difficult time with a level funded budget this year.
And so each 8, per the thinking or the design of the plan, would have the supports necessary
That's right.
to support the students in the program at that school.
Yes, and I will say one thing that I would just like to place before the committee before we get into a budget season next year is there are seven general education positions funded by the Metco budget that serve all of Newton, right? And so that's one of those mutually beneficial items that the Metco grant gives back to Newton Public School students. But we may be in the situation that we might, like, is that how we want to use those funds in the future to fund positions that may or may not be directly servicing Metco students? Many systems do it. They fund things like nurses or school psychologists, things like that, that help the whole school. Or do we want to restructure our dedicated support there? But either way, it's a budgetary impact to us as a system. So we just have to think carefully about it. We've always had the 7 teacher credit number in the budgets for many, many years under this Metco grant funding system.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Okay, thank you for the update. We can move on to our next agenda item, which is the joint labor management updates on the working groups for mental health, elementary, joint oversight, and Unit C.
So I'm going to ask the whole band to come up and all of our central office mates and our NTA partners in case there are questions. So, so before you have a memo from each of the facilitators of these various meetings. Joint labor management working groups are the lubricant that makes the district run. So between Chris Walsh and Mike Zillis, Jean Roundtree, Joanny Santa, Aisha Farag, and Casey No Miller, and myself, we have all sat on these committees with individuals from the staff and from our leadership teams in order to improve the lives of our students and to improve the lives of our staff. And these are groups that are going to continue to work in the next year as we come up to our next set of contract negotiations with recommendations that have been worked through in these various areas that constitute what we jointly agree is what we should do as a system. Now, that doesn't mean that we can always fund all those things, but we wouldn't put them before you if we didn't think that they were the right significant number of hours that have gone into these working groups. So you have a memo before you for each. I don't know how you want to run this, Chair. If you want them to say anything in particular about that work, or if you would like to ask questions based on the memo.
I'll leave it to our folks here if there's anything you would like to share with the group beyond the memo. Otherwise, we can just open it up for questions. Okay. All right. So let's just go to questions from the members on the memos that have been presented to us. It's getting to the end of the year, is it?
No questions, great. No, wait time.
Alicia, go ahead.
This one ahead, I think. So in the mental health working group, the next steps section, I had trouble reconciling that with the needs and highlights. So you mentioned a need for middle school and where's the middle school? And Metco considerations, but then in next steps, we're not really having I don't see any next steps that will address that. I'm just wondering if these are high level and they're going to get more granular, or if there are some specific things we should do to address the concerns with Metco and middle school students.
I'm just trying to remember what was included with regard to Medco. I know one of the things we talked about was more supports at the level therapeutically.
Okay. The Metco was,
So the
Regarding
METCO
restructuring?
restructuring was brought up by the members of the mental health working group as a concern because we were moving from METCO counselor positions at the elementary level to academic liaisons. And one of the challenges cited was students at elementary school, unlike middle and high school, cannot leave their elementary classroom to go to counseling services. So they have to be pulled from an academic block in order to receive the services. But it is a loss of counseling services for those individuals. And in addition of academic support, there was a lot of discussion about that in the committee.
I guess I still have that question. And do we have thoughts on how we want to address that? If we feel like we're going to have a missing level of support for them that they had before? No?
So we would like to try out the academic support model, which is push-in services with more face time with the kids. So they're both good support models. They do different things. What we're seeing, however, as you know from our disaggregated data, is that our METCO students have the lowest academic or the largest achievement gap is with our METCO students. So I think we have not changed that situation with the current support model. So we're going to try something different.
And I would add with the new social worker positions, and we have SEL interventionists, they're still available to students in Metco.
Okay, thank you. Tamika?
So sticking with the mental health working group findings or suggestions, for the Bright North and Bright South program, what can you describe a little bit more what the partnership with Brookline is going to look like? I understand that you're going to be working closely with them and modeling the program after their Bright program, but what does that specifically entail? Are you sharing like resources and curriculum and?
That's right. Yes. So both. So the Brookline Center for Community Mental Health has been doing this for decades, running Bright programs across the country. They have over 200 programs. And so they have the experience and expertise in running these programs. So they've helped us out. So we've signed on through a very generous grant from the Newton Schools Foundation to partner with them at their highest level of support. So this includes, I believe it's bi-weekly, it's certainly regular support from them. We have a dedicated support person that comes and meets with both teams on a regular basis. We have access to all of their parent and family supports. So this is a weekly YouTube live family, I'll have to get back to you on this, but it is a group support for families, for students in Bright, but it's also open to actually any family member. There'll be more communication coming. It's open to any family, in the families of high school students. There is a online portal that has a number of resources and courses for our staff to take. There are monthly PD opportunities for all of our high school staff as well, not just those working in Bright. There is also a local symposium that's offered every March for Bright participating districts. So think of it like our mental health summit that all of our staff are invited to. Most our counselors will probably engage in that. Actually, they invited our staff at North, I think for the last 2 years, to come and just see what's available to them. So it's a number of supports and structure and protocols that we haven't had access to while we're running Springboard.
Well, I will just join my colleagues in saying I think it's a wonderful move for the district and certainly the best possible educational model for our students in this this class, so.
It really is. I mean, if I can just stress again, right now through Springboard, we serve in a year probably between 50 and 60 students at most in that tiny program, but very mighty program. By expanding it, we're looking at being able to provide services for students whose education has been interrupted through mental health challenges. We're looking at upwards of 200 students now that we can serve, which I think is huge because the need is there, and that's what the high schools have been telling us. So I'm hopeful.
I have one sort of like big philosophical question. This might be probably a question more for you and maybe for Chris or Mike. So as we go through these, and I can envision, a whole host of recommendations, some of which, might be implementable, some might not be implementable, whether it's logistically, whether it's financially, whatever it may be. Is the envisioned outcome here to be sort of a, this is just in a, in a perfect world what we want? Is it is it something that would look like your budgets where you say, there's tiers of potential implementation here? Is it things where we say, well, we can recognize, funding these things through various measures? Like, how are we going about that piece of the puzzle of the, the world we want versus the world we live in kind of thing?
So the good news is we're going to put that question right to all of you because we are going to bring you what we think is the best agreed upon set of recommendations. And then we're going to need to decide, do we want to build it this way? And if the answer is yes, then we will have to align that with our long range plan and our long range funding. So there's no surprises.
Okay. So consider it in the same sort of way we talked about the budget of the starting point is what do we need, whether we can pay for it or not, and then we work backwards from there is effectively
Right.
how we're approaching this.
And there's a lot of, certainly Mike and Chris can speak from their perspective, and I welcome that. There's a lot of synergy around the goals and the ideas that we have. So I don't think you're going to hear anything here that's like zany, like out there kind of stuff. These are all things that we believe would enhance the lives of students and staff. That said, it's a world of choices, right? And you have to make those hard choices.
Okay, fair enough.
I want to just express a couple of things.
Please.
Of some concern with Casey indicating that the move from Springboard to Bright is going to expand the service capability of Newton Public Schools, knowing that the actual staff is reduced from the staffing at Springboard. So we have a reduction of staff split between two schools that are now going to service even more children. And so I have a hard time following how that's going to happen. So it may be that coming up, you'll need more FTE for these programs if you are going to serve that many students. I also think, the METCO reorg did save $100,000, but it also replaced Unit A, social workers and counselors, with Unit C staff as academic liaisons. So in a time when we are reorganizing our interventions to get rid of Unit C intervention aides in favor of hiring more qualified Unit A specialists, we are, for our METCO students, replacing Unit A staff with aides to support their academics. And I was in impact bargaining on this, trying to get an idea of what that support would look like, and didn't get a lot of clear answers as to who would be guiding the work of those Unit C staff throughout this. But I did learn that they weren't going to get intervention from these academic liaisons because they get the same services of all Newton Public School students. So I don't see, for me, the $100,000 save doesn't make a lot of sense. But that's Anna's decision. So as far as the elementary day work that we did, Aisha and I with our committee, the cost of that will depend on the recommendation, and there'll be a range of recommendations. I'm sure that the committee will come up with both with keeping I believe the changes we need to make can be made within the constraints of the current school day. So that saves some money, because if you have to change the elementary school day, that's going to be quite costly for the district. But
I'd say that's kind of part that we've actively discussed in terms of scenarios, looking at what is possible within the existing parameters, what needs to happen in order to address. We have a
Yeah.
list of problems we're trying to solve, and looking at a variety of different scenarios and what it would take to address those problems. We've done a lot of work this year, and I think we've really dug into the team has built. I think the team has built a solid understanding of
yes,
what
definitely.
those issues are, that have been informed not only by the group members' experiences, but through survey data as well with elementary educators. And so we will continue in next year to continue to play out those scenarios and look at what those implications are. But I think we forecasted for you during budget season that these groups were happening, and that we did expect that we would be bringing forward recommendations and the products of our work to you all to discuss further next year.
Indeed.
Indeed.
Okay, thank you. That helpful clarification. Rajiv, then Tamika?
I have a question around the Unit C working groups. Like, I think, Casey, for you and Joanny, did you cover at all hiring of Unit C staff? Because that traditionally has been a challenge in terms of getting to full strength. We always have empty positions we're hiring for, and it seems like that would factor into challenges with lack of coverage or lack of services being delivered. I didn't see it mentioned here, but I didn't know if it had been covered as part of any other discussion.
Joanne, do you want to address that?
We were not.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
No, you stay right there. The working group looked at not so much vacancies in positions, because we actually started the year off pretty strong with positions nearly all filled. But we looked at reasons for absences, the reasons for having to either have a floater or the impact of BTs being out on the students, and also when we reassign known individuals to the student, because I think it's very difficult if you have students who don't have the folks who know them, who are regularly coming in, and making sure that they don't get dysregulated and that they have a great day. Having somebody who's a floater who's not familiar with them wouldn't be the best move. But then that means that a teaching assistant from another classroom might be the person that's always full. So we looked at attendance, absences of staff, how different schools fill those positions, and what's the impact of that, and how different they are from one school to another. I think one of the things we discovered is that it's very complex, and each school had a different way of doing that. It wasn't clear if each school used the same matrix or priority when deciding where to pull and how to fill. So, we did end up with a 2,000-piece puzzle on the table, putting it together, but I thought we got really far in surfacing what some of the challenges are, some of the issues are, what data we wanted to pull together. There was an attempt at pulling data together, but it wasn't necessarily what we needed to look at, so we're trying that again. And we have a new data analyst in HR who's helping us pull that information together. So we'll be continuing the work. I think, Mike is here, maybe he can also speak to it, but I'm not telling tales out of school when I say that. We didn't think that we would have recommendations at the end of this year. We really did think that this was a little bit more complex than that, and that we would be doing a lot more digging in terms of the data, and also trying different things as we go along.
Right. And I fully understand that, and I appreciate the challenges, having seen some of them firsthand, right? Just saying, I can go back 18 years and say that the vacancies have been a challenge. And sometimes it's not necessarily across the whole system. It's, you know, you have 3 vacancies at a particular school or in a particular program, and that has a pretty adverse impact on being able to provide coverage, services, et cetera. So I would just, that may not be part of the mandate of this team, but I would just suggest we think about how to address that ongoing vacancy challenge. And it may not have been a challenge this past year. I'm confident it will resurface at some point.
Oh, that's definitely something we can do. That one thing I can say is that the working group has been quite a think tank. Worked really hard and has been quite a think tank around bringing ideas up and asking questions to make us really look at things from different perspectives. So it's been really thorough. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
What I want to say to your specific question, Rajiv, is that part of what we're working to do is make the working conditions of the people that we have hired already more sustainable. So when we talk about a floater in a program like Stride at Newton North High School, where you're working with a very challenging population and it's very stressful. And if someone is absent, and these are people that are working right face to face with children, if they're ill, they're going to get ill, right? If you're working with that kind of population and it's very stressful work, if you're out for the day and there isn't someone to come back in for you, then everyone else in that program suffers. And then it kind of creates a chain reaction. So what we're looking at in the long run is, how do you sustain the services we have in a way that's humane to the people delivering those services? That's one of our priorities. The other thing I want to say is, data is hard to collect sometimes. We don't have a history in this district of collecting data. So when we went out and tried to find what were the coverage patterns in all of the different elementary schools, well, every single elementary school has its own way of documenting what coverage and communicating the coverage for that day. And it's not so simple as us just asking them to give it to us. They just don't have it in a form that we could use. One other thing about the data is that at the end of the year, Joannie introduced us to the data system using the dashboard that they're going to be using with our new data manager. We didn't have that at the beginning of the year. So we're really beginning a process of investigating how we go about staffing Unit C members, supporting Unit C members, and looking at what the patterns of absences are and where we need to support them better. It's a long-range project.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And as you know, I'm pretty invested in supporting Unit C. So again, would love to hear more, not just in terms of improving working conditions and making it easier for the department heads at the various schools. I saw you have Lisa Goldthwait on here, which is fantastic. What we can do to improve working conditions and support, because it then comes down to delivering services to our students and helping them be in a space that helps them learn and grow, right? So, but I would just, again, suggest, if we think, again, based on data and what we've seen before, that we have vacancy challenges, let's think about how to address them. And it may not be easy, but I think we need to think about that.
I just want to add one other thing about that committee. If you walked in the room, Rajiv, and you didn't know the players, you wouldn't know that it's a joint labor management committee, because you wouldn't know that there are any sides there. We're all on the same side of really doing our best to provide what our students need and what our members need in order to provide those services.
I'm out. Great, that's great. I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tamika?
So along that note, that was one of the questions that I was going to ask, which was, would you characterize as a successful model of working together and collaborating together, this joint labor management process overall. And I think, Mike, you've touched on that, a very, very solid way. So that was the one thing. And then the other thing I wanted to follow up with a comment on the interesting point, among the many interesting points, Chris, that you made, but this one vis-a-vis the Metco staff restructuring. I'm grateful to you for raising the concern that you raised in this setting, because I think it's incumbent on us to follow up and to probe whether the objectives, which are the drivers of this staff restructuring, are actually being met, whether the students are supported in their progression of that working as it was designed. And if not, we have to be prepared and poised to make a quick and a nimble change, right? So I think that's always a valid thing to put into and in front of the people who are charged with making those decisions. And so I thank you for that. Oh, sorry, I'm laughing. And sorry, I'm so on a rant. But I think what Mike said about our data and the ability to have the data and to utilize it and be able to track it from student to student, year over year, that's what's going to make it easier for us to be able to say, okay, it's not working, we've got to rejigger this. And so, yeah, that's it.
Okay. You looking for more of a response on the first question there, or? Okay.
What was the question?
The just success of the process overall, and
The way it
this is being effectively a model of how to, collaborate going forward.
So we haven't had a lot of joint labor management committees that have been tasked through contract negotiations the way these committees were. I mean, we've had an ongoing joint labor management group of a number of committees like that, like the high school joint oversight, middle school joint oversight, elementary joint oversight, the joint instructional council. But that's an oversight committee. It's not challenged to reach a particular goal. What I have found, I think this is what I would want to emphasize is I think everybody in the room, in the committees that I've been in, have wanted the same thing. So if I'm in the high school joint oversight committee and we've been tasked with looking at class size for high school, we all want the class sizes to be smaller, right? If I'm in the mental health committee, we all want to serve our students' mental health better. In the Unit C, we all want that. We all want to create a more sustainable environment where we really can deliver those services with less cost on the people delivering them. I think that's a common goal. What becomes difficult, I'm going to go back to what Chris was saying about, this isn't what's really difficult for us, I think, in these committees, and I know one member that I had kind of dropped out towards the end of the high school oversight, is that we're doing this in a culture, in a climate where we're instead of adding incrementally funds to incrementally implement what we take it to be the priority goals of these committees, rather than being able to do that, we're doing it in a context of trying to save money at the same time. And it doesn't work that way. I mean, one of the concerns I have, I agree with you, Emily, the Bright programs, these were strongly advocated for in our Joint Labor Management Committee, but no one wanted to eliminate Springboard as it now exists. And we all wonder what's going to happen to the students that Springboard was serving, because Springboard was not serving kids who were transitioning back into high school. These were kids that were out of high school and couldn't function in that larger context. They're not able to go from class to class to class in that large building, in that large climate. They need a sub-separate program where they're protected, where their therapeutic needs are front and center. We don't have that next year. We're going to have a Bright program that's going to transition kids, but we don't have kids who need a long-term stabilization program. We don't have it. So we took money from one program to fund the other program, but we lost something really valuable in the process. So I want to commend Dr. Nolan for the strong advocacy, and you, Chris, for the strong advocacy that you gave to the schools around the budget. But if we're going to be successful in these committees and continue to function with the common goal of addressing the challenges in the system, we're going to have the funding to do that. We're going to have to be able to count on that funding year in and year out. And the other thing that these budget battles cost us is we're going to need to have our people paying attention to this work and not fighting the public fight to get money. We need the steady incremental growth in the Newton Public School budget that will support not only existing programs, but the Thrive budget that we all know what we need to get to, and that isn't a pipe dream, but the reality of what our students need. Sorry to go on a lot, but that's what we will need as people in these committees if we're going to be successful.
I don't disagree with much of what you said. I don't want the Bright program to be mischaracterized, so I just want to clarify a couple of things. One is that it is a separate program. So there are spaces identified at each of the high schools right now for the clinician and the academic facilitator and the students who will be in there. There is a culture of transition that is established from day one. So these teams meet weekly on each individual student, and in some cases daily, depending on how severe the student's needs are, and to talk about readiness, because the idea is that the students can join back the community, the school community, when they are ready. And so what has been removed that in what will be the Bright programs that Springboard has was dedicated academic teachers, which we do have at the high schools, the academic teachers. But to your point, if I had the budget of my dreams, I would have it all. But it is a sub-separate program where the academics will be delivered in the program by the academic facilitator with support from the high school teachers. And the students will only go back into the larger high school when they are ready, which is assessed on a regular basis. So that therapeutic milieu is developed, and through the expertise of the Brookline Center, we'll get that.
Thank you. Anping?
I'm very impressed of this discussion. I wish we would have this kind of discussion earlier. Mike, I appreciate you give your perspective and made a good argument why we need thriving budget. And I wish this kind of discussion would have happened earlier. Regarding specific Springboard redesign, I could not say much, but I totally agree. We need data, and data hopefully will show that if this redesign will be successful. Like the other teacher absence, other things, we need data. And since I came on board, I was always talking about data, but also I recognize in the past years, data was not very systematically, collected and managed, partially because of money. Need talent and resources to do that. But come back to this, I'm so happy to hear this kind of rational educational discussion. And I hope, Mike, you don't mind I'm saying this, because in the past, when it came to school committee, normally, your input is a little bit different. But this time, I hope I'm saying the truth, because and that's why I'm impressed. But in the past, you're talking about something which is a little bit, let's say, reality oriented.
Well, Anping, you only give me 3 minutes on those other occasions. I get a little bit more time.
Well, that's a good point. But I did not give you 3 minutes. That's a rule, But finalize my point. I want to say I hope this kind of process will continue, and that's important. Join, a group. That's the best model. Then we're fighting from outside, even though I agree we still have our perspective, and you argue for the teachers from teachers' perspective, which is very legitimate. That's all right. And especially for the high school, the sub teachers and teaching absence. And I heard a lot of parents complaining about that. But it's a very complicated issue, especially with social emotional needs from the students and the teachers. That's the challenges. And sometimes we forgot, we each argue from our own perspective. But again, I'm encouraged. And I hope this process will continue, and differences will be there, and argument will be there, fighting will be there, but that's all fine. But I agree, we don't lose the sight. We are all working for the students.
Are you trying to tell me you don't want us to go on strike again? Is that what you're trying to say, Anping?
I would never use that word at this moment, at this time. But hey.
Perfect timing for the quack.
I'm glad to see, let's be a little bit humorous. I'm glad to see.
My heart is
other side
beating
of-
so fast right now. I want everyone to know.
Couldn't resist.
Like, I'm glad to see the other side of your leadership, which I did not see clearly in the past. So thanks for your input, and thanks for Casey's input too.
I think people have seen that other side of me too.
Well,
When I'm not speaking for 3 minutes.
I heard people mention that, but this time you made a very good case. At least I heard your perspective, and I was impressed. Try to be very reasonable and educational, and show your leadership as union leader. That's important. I understand that. But again, I said a little bit too much. I'm really glad I have this learning moment from you guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Anping. Rajiv?
I cannot possibly follow up here, and I'm not going to try. But I just wanted to confirm something, Casey, following up on what you said about Bright. One of the benefits of having the program at each high school is going to be that students can be gradually reintroduced. So inclusion can be ratcheted up or down depending on how the student is doing, which is much more difficult to do just geographically with Springboard here. So I've heard that point made by you before. It just hadn't come up in this discussion. We'll have to get the data and see how that works, but it's clearly a benefit of being able to reintroduce students whenever they're ready to regular classrooms at whatever speed or whatever portion of the school day is possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Accurate.
Okay.
Can I just respond to that as well? I hope I didn't give the impression that I don't think the Bright programs are really important, because that it was clear from our high school colleagues in our meetings that this is critical. It's also critical to expand this model into middle and elementary school. This is a beginning point. And at some point, we're going to have to consider the possibility of something that's not just Springboard, but perhaps an alternative high school of some sort, where kids who do not function well in a large, in the case of North, it's just too much for them to manage. And we have some space now. We're going to have buildings that we could use for that. So I think in the long run, I hope that that's something our committee talks about as putting on the table for a long-range vision of how Newton organizes its educational process to serve the needs of all students, including those students who are not well served in a high school environment.
I think that gets back to Central and what part of the model was for Central when it existed. And yes, we have to continue thinking about it, because if we have especially if we have the right cohort, then we can do something about it.
And by Central, you mean Central Middle School?
Meant Central High.
Well, Central High School, but I think what Mike is also adding to is there's probably a need there too.
Well, I was
to
thinking,
expand down.
I was thinking of something like Bright
That too.
in the middle schools, but in terms of an alternative high school, Central is for students who are on IEPs. This is for special needs. students. We need something for all students, including students that are on IEPs, but something that's more all-inclusive that will allow students to get the kind of education shaped the way they need it to be to meet their needs. Students with mental health issues are not necessarily on IEPs, but they have needs that can't be met in the high schools, and they can't be met in Central High School either. Neither place would be right for them. They couldn't go to Central High School because they don't have that in an IEP.
Ongoing challenges.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate the discussion.
I just want to say thank you, Mike, for all of the collaboration this year.
Thank you.
Okay. Why don't we move on to our next item, which is the school committee is responsible for appointing a member to the Newton Citizens Energy Commission. And we have a memo in front of us from Stephanie Gilman. Yeah, sure. Please, that'd be great. And is the candidate here?
One. We didn't have a chance to meet earlier, so nice to meet you. We spoke via email. So as you mentioned, there's an opening, school committee appointed member of the Newton Energy Commission. And so Edison Almeida is the correct pronunciation, has applied to become a member, and you have his resume, I think, in your materials. So I don't know if you have any questions.
Maybe Edison, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a quick couple minutes on your background and your interest in joining that commission.
Sure. So I am an engineer that became an entrepreneur into this energy transition space about 15 years ago. Started a couple of companies helping business lower their cost of energy by managing their peak demand. Ended up running it as founder and CEO for about 7 years until a couple of folks bought control of the business. I left and got into venture capital with a major global company called Schneider Electric. And then within Schneider, looked into a broad view of what are all the innovations that can change this landscape and really help accelerate the energy transition so that we can achieve decarbonization goals and all climate goals, not only on the municipal, state, but also national and global levels. And then did that for 3 years or so until I, over these last 3 years, since I left Schneider Electric, I've been more of a coach, mentor to founders and entrepreneurs of startups here in the Boston area, helping them figure out what is it that they need to do to be able to scale their businesses and really get to a certain size that they can move the needle and really realize the potential of all the innovations that they're trying to bring to market. So I've been here in Newton, living in Newton for 10 years. I'm a father of 2 daughters. Both of them, they are going to be at Newton South High School next year. Very exciting. And I've been able to attend a couple of meetings at the Newton Citizens Commission on Energy, forthcoming to be Newton Energy Commission in a few weeks. And it's a great group. They're doing great work. And I would be really honored to be part of them and to help the city advance on its climate action plan and agenda and really be an example for all the other towns and municipalities in Massachusetts. And it's a pleasure to meet you all.
Great. Thank you for that introduction. Is there any questions any members have for Mr. Almeida? Emily?
I would like to make a motion. That's
Yep,
okay with you?
please.
I move that we approve Edison Almeida as the school committee representative on the I want to get this right.
Newton Energy Commission.
Mayor knows, the Newton Energy Commission.
Okay, motion
I'd
by
like to
Emily, second by An Ping. Is there any further discussion on that motion, Tamika?
So by way of discussion, I just want to commend you for putting yourself forward. I too serve on one of Newton's boards and commissions, and it is appointed by Mayor Fuller. And it's an honor and a privilege to be able to do so. And especially when you have particular skills that you can lend that increase the strength and the fervor of the discussion, and help our city improve. I think that's even better. And it seems as though you were poised to do just that. So I thank you, and that's it.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion, Mayor Fuller?
We all have to vote yes, given your first name. Just saying.
It really is very appropriate. I mean. Okay, let's take a vote. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2 is yes. Ward 3?
Yes, and thank you.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6 is absent. Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 8 is absent. Mayor Fuller?
Yes.
Okay, 7-0 with 2 absent. And congratulations, welcome, and good luck serving on the commission.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it.
Looking forward to
Thank
working
you.
with all.
Okay, let's move on to our next item, which is our superintendent valuation, on which we should be voting this evening. Just as a quick update and background, there was no meaningful changes other than one addition of language. For anyone who was not tuning in last time, the committee had an average rating for Dr. Nolan's performance this year of exemplary, which is the highest of the 4 categories offered to us by our friends at DESE. In terms of the only addition, clarification, I should say, to the verbiage in the evaluation was that in response to a question that was batted around a little bit, as whether Dr. Nolan can shoot from the hip too often. The full context of that was put in there to say, if an honest, if not fully baked response to some questions or concern is the price to pay for transparency, it is a price I'm personally willing to live with. So just to provide that context, as there was some question about that. With that, if there's no other questions or comments, would someone like to put forth a motion to approve the superintendent evaluation?
I so move.
Alicia? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second by An Ping. Any discussion on that motion?
Chris.
Sorry, go ahead, An Ping.
Just quickly, I appreciate that discussion. I appreciate got a chance to make my point, and you guys listened. And I think probably it's important to note that Dr. Nolan did something extraordinary during the budget discussion, and I was one of those school committee members who emphasized again, we need to educate public. We need to let public know. So I'm very happy at that time that Dr. Nolan stepped up and made a strong argument, being proactive, which is very different from previous administration. So again, I'm happy that we have the contest, understanding that the evaluation is only in a limited space, because overall I think there's a lot of nuanced context, and especially among those people who share a little bit different viewpoint from mine. And but overall, I'm very glad we got the kind of consensus here, and the overall evaluation is exemplary. I think and Dr. Nolan deserved that. and the learning process, of course. But I'm very glad that this set a new standard for our leadership and got involved and working together with community. Now that's very important. I think this time more input come in, stakeholders got in, city council, mayor's office, and parents all got involved. I think overall this is a very positive and wonderful community process to do the project. This is more than just project process itself. It's also educational process, which paves the way for the future budget discussions. So again, thanks for the opportunity to say it. Thanks.
Any other discussion of the motion? Okay, then let's take a vote on the motion to approve the superintendent evaluation for the current year. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2 is yes. Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4? Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6 is absent. Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 8 is absent. Mayor Fuller?
Yes.
Okay. 702, that is approved. Yep. Dr. Nolan?
I just want to say to the committee, I'm grateful for the collaboration and the feedback. Our bi-monthly docket meetings are very productive, and they help me understand how your expectations mix with how the work of our team is impacting the community and the students. I also want to say thank you for standing by me and by our team during constituent service events and listening sessions and throughout the budget process. Your support has allowed for significant change to support the academic and the social emotional growth and well-being of our students. And we feel that we are really making some momentous shifts, and we're starting to feel the momentum begin. In response to the shoot from the hip comment, I encourage people just to read the full committee members' evaluations for context. And I appreciate you speaking up on Ping on my behalf. However, I do opt for greater transparency and speed in getting back to our city residents and families and partners because of the significant feedback about a lack of transparency and response. And I really did want to lead with a customer service orientation. I appreciate everyone's feedback. I will continue to reflect on how I can do better in that arena. I also look forward to the new contract you have given me in the year ahead. I value my 3,000 colleagues, our 11,000 students, and our partnerships. And I really love the district and the direction that we're moving in. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, let's move to our fiscal and ops report. I see Mr. Hurley in the room. Always a pleasure.
Speaking of treasured colleagues, guest appearance.
Good evening, everyone. Liam Hurley, Assistant Superintendent. I think I'm the last person here standing. We got a couple of presentations. I've got the fiscal and ops. I've actually got our NC director, Kate Carpenter-Benier, that I've got NC that I wanted to talk to you about as well. And then we've got a facility update. And then RDA, Gene Raymond, is back there to present the secondary schools report. So I'm just going to jump into the fiscal and ops report. This is really kind of close to the third quarter report. We're really just finalizing our fiscal year, as you know, June 30th. So we're on target. As you know, as part of our FY26 budget, we needed to bring forward approximately $3,350,000. We're stating that we're going to do that. My hope is that we can do a little bit better than that. We've got a pretty extensive report here talking about some of the variances, ups and downs. Overall salaries being the biggest component of our budget, showing approximate balance of a positive way of about $1.6 million. We do have some areas of that, ups and downs, which are typical for us. On the flip side and the expense side, I think one of the bigger areas that we were over budget for, and I've been talking about during the year, has been our substitute lines. This is with our outside vendor Precision. That should be looked at with the fact that we have had savings with our ISS, which is our substitutes, our in-house substitutes, as well as our daily subs. So it is something that we're talking about internally on our side. And obviously, we've got absences, and we're really trying to spend a real push from the administration to cover any absences that we've got in our buildings. I'm happy to go on in detail on a few of these. I would just say that our tuition is up a little bit, and we're at approximately 120 students. Our gross tuition is sometimes masked a little bit in our budget because the net tuition shows up at around $6 million. The gross tuition for sending students out of district is approximately 16.9 or nearing $17 million. So it's a pretty big number. And digging into the tuition, the out of district placements a little bit, there was 134 total students placed out of district, but during the course of the year, students have either aged out, moved out of the city, or actually come back to Newton as well. So the current number of placements is about 120 right now. So there's quite a bit of fluidity in this, and there's currently, I think, 21 pending placements, which again is actually pretty standard for us. Few areas that we're also looking at: transportation. Obviously, utilities has been actually a pretty good spot for us, and I think the city has been locking in some decent rates for us. We'll talk a little bit about some of the solar projects in the facility report. So, number of areas here, and that I can go on about, but I think I could just leave it to that and open that up for any questions you have.
Okay, thank you. There's been the usual extensive memo given to us, so we can take questions. Rajiv?
Liam, so in most categories, it seems like we're kind of in a reasonable range of tolerance in terms of being up and down. We had a slightly warmer winter, better rates from the city, and all of that. I thought last year we actually budgeted additional funding for substitute teachers and coverage. But that still seems to be by far the biggest discrepancy we have against the budget. So were we caught by surprise by something, or even with the increased budget last year, was it simply not enough?
Yeah, it still was not enough. So we did increase it. We did increase it. I was fearful it was still not enough money. There's just strong demand in the schools. We're now offering this up at the high schools as well. And this is kind of moved for kind of a coverage-based situation. So it is something that I think we need to look at. But I think, as I mentioned, though, if you look at, there is several hundreds of thousands of dollars in the ISS, in the substitute salary lines, that are savings. So that increase is actually somewhat offset by the salary savings we've got there. I think it's just something we need to look at internally, and I do want to properly budget for it in the future. It has been an area, it's a little bit, I don't want it to become like a charter maintenance where we're habitually lower than the actual amount.
Right. And Anna, I know one of the things that was worked out in the contract was allowing teachers to be a substitute for the same subject if one of their colleagues was out.
Yep.
Do we know if that led to an improvement? Like, did we have enough of our teachers agreeing to step up and cover an additional class, but that was necessary, or do we not know yet?
Yeah, I mean, I can bring you data on that if you would like. I think we have a way to track that. We're sorting through all our time-sheeted work now, because that's a different step than payroll. So they have to apply for it if they covered it. I mean, that said, it's that's on a period by period basis. So it's a lot less of a comprehensive solution than having substitutes at the high school level. I mean, one of the issues that, has come up in this discussion, and this has been the district practice to not have substitutes at the high school level. But what happens there is there's no expectation that plans are left for the substitutes, even the teachers who are subbing in. So we are going to have to address that. And we have a bunch of ideas, and it's one of the reasons for these working groups is to try to address those issues up front. And we have our twice a month joint labor management meetings where Joannie, Jill, and I meet with Chris and Mike and try to work out things like that. So even though there's not a working group on this per se, we've been working on it. And now that we have the absence tracking data system, we're actually going to get our hands around how big is the problem, how many periods, are teachers out for the full day, half days, so we can really target the solution.
Thank you. That's helpful. Just completely anecdotally, when I talk to fellow parents who have students in high schools, in our two high schools, they will consistently bring up that there are extended absences for various subjects, and it's unclear how those are being addressed. So I'd actually hoped with the changes that we made last year with adding funds to the budget for this particular item, we'd be in a better place. I'm not fully sure if we are, but certainly I'm assuming the extra funding we've paid out has helped address some of those absence issues. So we'll look at the data, but it's a big discrepancy, so it just stands out.
It is a big discrepancy. I know we're tracking data. One of our platforms, Open Architects, we're able to basically get a daily look and see what our absences are. So I know it's something the administration's looking at, talking to principals as well. So,
Okay. Other questions? Mayor Fuller?
We went through a complicated and difficult budget season, as all of us are well aware. We're finishing projected excess amount of money is going to be $3.35 million. Some of that, a small portion, is due to a spending freeze that I think the superintendent appropriately put in place for supplies and equipment. That's about $335,000.
And some hiring.
And some hiring. Again, appropriately done. The rest of the 3 million, however, if that's the right number, I grant you that might not be the precise number, looks like an organic. It wasn't. You can top down or bottom up.
Yeah.
Much of it was just an organic bottom up changes. Talk to us about having $3.35 million in excess funding in a year where we were.
Can you clarify what you mean by organic bottom up?
So salaries are projected to end the year with a positive balance of approximately 1.64 million. Transportation is projected to be under budget, i.e. have a positive budget of 720,000. I'm rounding slightly. These were not decisions that we changed our transportation or salary lines for the most part, but correct me, I could be wrong. But this is how the year unfolded. Very different for supplies and equipment, where we'll have a positive balance of roughly 335, but that was a management decision to freeze spending. So I think of them as two different types of reasons for having positive balances. But I'm just interested in how Liam thinks about all this in light of the complicated budget, and I would say the pressure particularly put on the city side to come forward with more funding.
Right.
When in fact we're ending the year with $3.35 million in excess funds.
Right.
I just want to remind everyone that we are expected to carry forward $3.35 million. So we have to hit the mark.
Right. So that was the piece I think I wanted to say as well. Yes. So this has been our kind of reliance on our carry forward. And so we're now banking on that $3,350,000 as an offset in actually FY 26, along with the circuit breaker. So actually when I was down at MASBO, one of the best practices in terms of circuit breaker, we're doing it almost backwards. Ideally, what we would do is we would have a known quantity of circuit breaker. Let's just round to say it's $7.5 million. You actually would carry all of that money forward into the next year, and that's your budget. You know what you're going to get. We are banking on carrying forward, so we actually have to. When you said it's actually excess, this is actually just right on the mark. This is what we need to actually balance FY 26. So that's kind of what we've been doing, I think, since about FY 21. We've been using the previous year's balance to carry forward. from FY '24 to FY '25, we were banking on about 3 million. Part of the reasons we have savings is we actually ended up carrying about $5 million. So it really extra. So that $2 million has helped us as well this year. You'll also recall in this right now, this assumes, and I think it would be worthwhile, the school committee, this assumes the $500,000 encumbrance with NCE comes back to NPS. So that is, we're counting on that money as NC does not need that funding at this point. So it really is basically part of the baked in. This is our budgets, I think, are more linked each year by year, than almost any other district that we're, they're kind of the multi-year budgets that we've got to look at. So that 3350, that was what we said we had to carry forward. And I'm saying that we're going to hit that mark, and I'm hoping to do a little bit better. So I wouldn't in some ways call that excess. Anything beyond 3.350, I would use the term that's excess from what our target was.
Can I do a follow-up, Chris? I understand all that. Thankfully, as you know, I understand that all. But again, much of the extra monies, again, for the school committee, the mayor, and MPS administration to walk through, you've got 1.65 million in extra in salaries. So either we're over budgeting, so we can do it lots of different ways, or in transportation, there's 720,000. So working together collaboratively on understanding the estimates for each of these, and then building the appropriate budget. As you know, I've always been all in on this, but it requires us working together on all of these different pieces, including the carry forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, again, the salaries that again makes up salaries and benefits are about 87%. So if we're going to carry that money forward, that's the likely spot, obviously. And then the tuition is another area. And we've actually seen higher increases actually in tuition than we've had over the last couple of years. They've been going up for many years. They were flat in the $13.5 million. Then that 14% OSD rate hit. Then I think it was about 4.5% and 4%. So, and we've actually had some more expensive out of district placements. So those have, as we keep so many students in district. So that's the area that I think typically that we're going to see those savings. And obviously we tried, we clawed away to try and get those supplies and equipment down. Those are some of our few basically discretionary spending that we've got.
I just want to say that there is no way on earth that I am going to let us be taken to task for hitting the mark that we were expected to hit in the subsequent budget year. And you can tell them that we are not doing professional development for our staff right now. We are not doing summer professional work. We are cutting this year's services and budget to pay for next year. And I'm not going to have some aspersions cast on that very hard work that we have slowed down the organization. And every single person sitting in the back of the room has had to say no to everything that we had planned to do this year in order to hit that mark. So I know like I'm fired up about this because we have to hit that mark or we can't even start at the level funded place that we said we would start next year. This is not some secret shell game that we are playing. We are expending exactly the amount of carry forward that we said, and we're sweating it on turnover savings and trying to hire lower on the salary scale to hit the turnover savings target. So I just want to be real clear that there's no false negotiations going on here.
Yeah, so I think part of the confusion that I'm hearing coming about is, and this goes back a little bit to what you and I discussed, Liam, in terms of how to present some of these things. There's $3.5 million of funding built into next year's budget, which is coming from, effectively a cash balance being carried forward. There was $5 million of funding in this current year's budget from last year's cash balance. And so had that whole thing never started back in 2021, you said it was before I joined the committee, I know, had that timing element of using some money left over from this year to fund next year had never started, maybe we would never be in this position of saying, well, we have to go and have some money left over to fund next year. But now that we're in that game, it's hard to get out of it. And if we had not carried forward $3.5 million, then we'd effectively take a $3.5 million cut to services, which wouldn't be particularly sustainable. So I think it's really I think some of the confusion comes in the way you think about it. I think about it as it is just a source of funding for the next year. When we look at next year and we're going to say, this is the total amount we need to service our students, what are the sources of funding that are going to add up to that same number? And it's going to be an appropriation from the city. It's going to be the Education Stabilization Fund. It's going to be a carry forward. It's just a source of funding. Yeah, Rajiv?
So, kind of coming back to my first question, I think this is just a suggestion, but having a percentage for the variances might help people look at this, because, for instance, yes, the surplus on salaries looks like a big number, but as a percentage, it's under 1%. So with 2,000 or 2,500 employees, whatever that number is, being within a 1% variance is pretty much on track. So it's the same with all of these. So I had looked at the percentages. It's on a spreadsheet at home, but some of the variances stick out, like for contract services, and others are pretty much what you would expect with a well-run kind of fiscal structure. So it may help the public and members of the committee just understand that some of these variances are what you would expect in the course of an ordinary year. Others, thanks to Kate and her team's work, getting the $500 million unblocked.
500,000.
$500 million.
Kate, you did great.
Kate is funding the city all on her own. 500K, having that unblocked, that's a material impact. So
yeah, we can add those percentages certainly to our chart.
It just, I think, will kind of set the scale in terms of, are there funds lurking elsewhere, or is it what you'd expect within reasonable bounds?
And just to be clear, your recommendation that we release the $500,000 is included in that $3.35 million.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, yep. Go ahead and move forward.
Superintendent, that was not meant as an aspersion. Seems like I hit a raw nerve. It certainly was not intended that way, but I can hear the impact on you.
Thank you.
Other questions on Ping?
I had the same question as Rajiv mentioned that first I was a little bit surprised, if not shocked, that for the high school teachers, the sub-teachers, this huge increase, almost 500,000. Yeah, it's 525, suppose, but probably need to help me because those 8, vacancies, and I was really surprised. Same agency, but how could it be that huge increase of much more than you expected or than we budgeted?
Yeah, it's really due to demand. So the demand in our vendor has been now up to speed for a couple of years, and they've been building up a pool of candidates, and we've got these absences that are in our school. I think what I've been saying, and so is that we've got savings though in some of our salary lines. So it's one's called ISS salaries, which are instructional support salaries, plus our substitute salaries. There's another line there. So that offsets some of that increase. But yeah, the Precision HR, which is a vendor, it's a third-party contracted vendor, that has been an area that's certainly over budget, and determine if that's, is this the best path forward? Can we budget, higher amounts in future years? Does that start to erode kind of the, other areas of the budget?
Just one thing to add on, Ping. Also, we did do better in hiring aides throughout the year. And typically Liam was banking on, we had had many years, as Rajiv just told you, of not being able to fully hire the aides. And so that savings would cover this overage, if you will. We also over budget by 10 aides in case 10 aides become available. And we did have to use some of those 10 aides this year, given the IEP changes this year. And people stayed more than they have in the past, so there's been less churn, which are all good signs of other things. But what it doesn't give us is any cushion on the contracted substitute line, which is why during the budget process, we came forward indicating that we needed to, just like we have for charter maintenance, up that portion of the budget in years to come. And we will also try to stop what's making all the absences occur.
That's the thing, I think, for parents, students, they should be happy, or they must be happy, no longer sitting there with someone just bench warmer, as they said, doing nothing. Now, if you have quality sub-teachers, that make huge difference. And but the money is a huge difference. Here, MPS was projecting positive balance of 525, but turned out to be the negative balance of 200. So that's talking about 700 down. That's huge. And I assume this will continue next year. Probably more so because with all inflation, right? You have quality sub-teachers. Probably the price is not going down. That's part for sure. The other things, I don't know if we anticipate the circuit break, the rebate, the percentage from 57 as we anticipated dropped to 47.
Yeah.
That's 10%.
That's 10%. Yeah. And right now they've not released the FY26 numbers yet. We won't actually hear until almost September, October. I believe that they're trying to more fully fund circuit breaker. So, we're going to have to wait and see. We did get notice we're actually going to get an extra $65,000 this year. It's still not up to what our original estimate was going to be, but they actually had some additional money in circuit breaker that they're putting out. So it's kind of a fifth quarter payment. But yeah, the transportation, the way that works is they reimburse the districts first for they call the instructional costs, which are mostly the out-of-district tuitions for schools. Whatever's left over is then they basically reimburse districts for transportation. And what was left over, unfortunately, was only that 47%. And it should be, they're trying to eventually get up to 100% of these reimbursements once these costs reach the circuit breaker threshold.
So, okay. Of course, Newton, we have wonderful, excellent, special education programs, and they're costly. And, but that's concerning. Of course, we need to, significant negative balances, come together, almost $1 million right there.
Yeah.
About 700,000 for the sub-teacher compensation, and then about 200, for the circuit break negative balance. Well, I'm glad that Dr. Nolan mentioned that we are cutting other things, so give people warning that we cut to the bone, and then the environment is not very supportive overall.
Yeah. I mean, we notified our staff, obviously, of our plans to basically, spending freeze, hiring freeze several months ago. So that's been out there. We're not going to be in that environment, I think, as we start the FY26 budget right now, but we're still obviously, I think, Dr. Nolan's approach is really to be as mindful as we can with any spending. And so we're going to be monitoring, and we'll report, basically our year ending probably next September, October, and we'll certainly be giving fiscal and ops reports to you folks on this. So on how we're doing.
It's tough. And as Chris mentioned, and you mentioned too, that in the past year we had 5 million carry forward money. Now it's less than 3.5 million. So unless there's some significant revenue somewhere, otherwise that money, even though we have, mayor's office give 3.5 or 4 point some percentage appreciation, but the carry forward money short of 1.5 million compared with last year. Is that right?
Yes, I mean, if that was the difference, yeah, we brought it down to, from 5 million down to 3.35. That's our planned, need for next year.
So, folks should know that it's not the free money. $3.3 million is not like something, oh, this is extra. No, every year we count on the carry forward money. Thanks.
Liam, logistically, do you need us to vote on that $500,000 this evening?
You voted to have it in, so ideally, I think it would probably be a good practice just so I can do it.
Okay.
You
And then you also had a recommendation that there are $65,000 of facility rentals owed from NCE.
Yep. So NCE is, and if we want Kate to come up, so again, big kudos to Kate and the team. I mean, I think that, not to too much, but they had been in the $395,000 to $400,000 of losing money these last several years. COVID was a real big hit on them. I would say we're in the turning around process. They're doing slightly better than break even. I think if we could pare that facility rental down over 2 fiscal years would help them. But it's a concept that I throw out to you folks, is just to try to help Kate and the team. I have another concept I threw out there as well that we could discuss in the fall if you'd prefer, about changing the facility rental model. I think that, this year we experienced about 5 months of the central staff change and the savings. Next year we'll have the full 12 months. And I know that Kate and the team are already thinking about revenue generating ideas that they've got. We've got some ideas I think that we're sharing with her and her team as well. So I think they're going to continue to this balance is going to continue to grow. So it's something that I was looking for some feedback from the school committee to say, if they ended with a $100,000 balance, take some type of percentage of it. I think the idea was to not cripple them. They will have that pension payment. I think it's August 30th of approximately $160,000 or $165,000. So their account will go negative. The comptroller's office is fine. They have what's called the controls are off, so payroll will still happen, expenses will still get paid, and then their revenue does start to grow back up during the year. So that has turned positive. It takes some time, and the goal would be over time is they've got a big enough balance that when that pension payment hits, that they don't go negative. But I think for at least some duration of time, I thought the idea of potentially sharing a percentage of kind of year ending balance might be an idea, or any ideas you folks may have as well.
So if this works for you, what I'd like to do is, given the $500,000, the release of that reserve is a sort of necessary thing. Let's tackle that. I think we can probably discuss and tackle in relatively short order the $65,000 facility rental, whether we want to spread that over 2 years. If we can reserve the other concept of, effectively restructuring how we think about facility rentals, I think that's a bigger discussion. And just given the time constraints this evening, I'm not sure that'll. So
Fine.
if we could hold that for the fall, that would be.
That's fine. It's just to plant a seed. I think
Okay.
that's it. Yep.
All right, Alicia?
So given the discussion that we just had about carry forward and how things are confusing and no one can understand the budget, I don't like the idea of spreading something over 2 years and for us to have one more thing hanging out there that we have to say, oh, but remember there's that, what would it be, 32.5 K for NCE that is actually owed. And I don't think we should do that. I would rather see the low balance in their account and us to consider helping them if help is required, than for us to have something strange on our balance sheet. I just don't think we can afford the confusion if we want to be transparent with the community.
Other thoughts on those two issues, Rajiv?
I see it a little differently, Leisha. The proposal to me looked a little bit more like a revenue sharing. So there's the 65,000 that was set aside, but going forward, the potential approach for looking at the end of year balance and then kind of allocating a percentage of it back to NPS, I think would be transparent, but deserves kind of deeper discussion.
Yeah, so the second option, I agree, we should discuss that, but the 65 on the table for facilities for this year that is owed, I think we're just talking about that piece, right?
Yes, yeah. So to be clear, the proposal that Liam's asking is there is $65,000 owed currently from NCE to NPS. That is for facility rentals that have already occurred, right? It is a payable for them, a receivable for us. So not changing anything in restructuring how we charge facility rentals, but just given that their cash balance is relatively low at, what was it, $80,000?
Projected about $83,000. yeah.
83,000, and they have a $170,000 payment coming up. The ask is just to simply split that $65,000 payable. They will fund us 32,500 this year and 32,500 next year. So we're effectively just aging a receivable of 32,500 for an incremental year. So not any of the other percentage concepts are coming into play there.
All right, but we could also keep it whole and age it for an additional year.
Yeah, I would say this is the will of the committee. It is something that I would just, it is owed at this point, and so I think I just wanted to get some feedback on how you want to handle it. So we could simply charge them the 65,000. Their balance would go from approximately 83,000 down to, a little lower than $20,000 as a yearning balance. So they've got a little positive balance. Or the idea was just to kind of to help them out a little bit just for this duration. But you certainly could be in a position where we did not fund that for right now. We could have that whole 65,000 next year if you prefer. So it's really, I think, from my perspective, I think the overall idea right now is just we're out of practice from what typically we would be charging them. So this is, I want to put it into your hands on what you want to do with this.
I mean, personally, from my perspective, given the amount involved and the timing of 1 year, I'm a little indifferent. I hear Alicia's point. I think it's a valid point of just having more moving pieces, more things out there. I mean, to the extent the comptroller's willing to say, okay, their balance can effectively be negative, and presumably that gets, ultimately it gets funded from the city.
Our budget.
No.
Our budget gets funded from the city, so ultimately it gets funded from the city.
Right.
No, it would come out of NPS, just to be careful, just to be sure.
Yes. The city funds NPS. NPS funds NCE. So I think, I'm not going to argue it. Okay, it comes from NPS. I'm indifferent. Does anybody else have any strong opinions here?
I'm going to suggest that for the 65,000, we leave it as an account receivable for now. I also don't want us to get in a situation where we're taking those funds and moving them from NCE to NPS then results in a greater level of concern by the controller when he's looking at allowing NCE to run a deficit for a certain period of time. But that would be my thinking.
Okay, why don't we do this? Would someone put forward a motion on the $500,000 to release that reserve?
I move to release the $500,000 encumbrance.
Thank you.
I second.
Okay. Any further discussion on that motion? Okay, let's vote on that. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2 is yes. Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6? Absent. Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 8 is absent, and Mayor Fuller.
Yes.
Okay. So that will be released. That was a vote of 7-0-2. And that was Alicia and Rajiv, right? Okay. Okay. We're going to make life simple here. I'm going to move that we follow Liam's suggestion, and we will have NCE remit 32,500 of its fixed $65,000 payables balance this year. And to be clear, is this calendar year or fiscal year?
Fiscal year.
In fiscal year.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So in fiscal for year 25.
2025, yeah.
So that will be payable to us by June 30th.
Yes.
And then 32,500 payable to us by June 30th, 2026.
Yeah.
Okay. That motion is on the floor.
Second it.
Okay. Second by Emily. Is there further discussion? Okay. All right. Let's take a vote on that. Ward 1.
Yes.
Ward 2 is yes. Ward 3.
Yes.
Ward 4.
Yes.
Ward 5.
Yes.
Ward 6 is absent. Ward 7.
No.
Ward 8 is absent. Mayor Fuller?
No.
No. Okay. So that is passes by a vote of 1, 2, yep, 5-2, 2 absent. Give me 1 second. Okay. Thank you. Is there anything else? Yes.
So, prior to leaving this agenda item, as part of the comprehensive discussion on facilities, what was it? The
So it
chart,
was- Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
How comprehensive is that discussion going to be? Is it going to extend beyond NCE to others who utilize our facilities? Or are we specifically talking about a recommendation to NCE?
Great question. I mean, again, I'm happy to have your feedback. Last year, we took a very comprehensive approach, if you folks know, to all of our rentals, in fact, all of our fees. One of the things that I'll just remind you is for next year, we're almost to the point that we almost do not have any custodial overtime in our budget. I think it's down to about $32,000. So partly, the work you've done with increasing these fees. So my sense for this NCE to me should be a separate topic, I think, just on its own, outside, just to keep it simple, I think, from that perspective. But I'm open, if fees are on the table for everything, like we had done last year, we've done 2 years in a row with, some fee increases, and obviously costs continue to go up. So if that's something we can do at a separate meeting as well, maybe, later in the fall, if you'd like. It's really up to you folks.
I, for one, would be inclined to have that secondary ancillary conversation later in the school year. However, building in and inviting in the feedback of the folks who might be the most affected by having that continued discussion. And I'm okay with separating it out, NCE first, others subsequently.
Okay. Thank you. And I would just like to thank Kate and her team for getting NCE back in the black there, and allowing us to release that $500,000. Every bit is needed, as you're well aware. Okay, we can move on to the next piece of the Liam show.
Well, I'm gonna have Stephanie join as well. In fact, I'm gonna surprise Stephanie. She is we're gonna do just a very quick facilities update. Again, this is a really, comprehensive report here. So Stephanie, I'm gonna put you on the spot because I've been talking too much, and we talked a little bit about what we're gonna,
So we've got a number of smaller infrastructure projects, as well as the 4 major capital projects. So the memo covers just brief updates on all of those. In addition, we have the supplemental capital improvement plan that, and I don't remember the date, April 22nd came out. So this is our first facilities report since that came out. So that's attached at the end, just the school piece. There were very few changes, just an increase in the Horace Mann cost and and then some changes in rankings based on other projects coming off of the CIP. In addition, we have an update on the solar projects. There's a number of solar projects across the city, rooftop projects, canopy projects. We're actually getting one at the Ed Center, which is very exciting. That'll start in July. There are some new EV charging stations are in the planning stage as well. And then tonight, we're having the update on the secondary schools facility study as well. And then there's a number of parks projects, as well as some transportation projects, all great improvements happening across the city related to the schools. So I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you want specific details on any of those projects today. Is anything?
No, I mean, again, I just go back, the level of major construction projects and projects just in general is unbelievable. Thanks to the city, Josh Morris, Dave Stickney, Alex Volcarsi, lots of people. I feel like I've been to more ground shoveling openings, and I know there's more coming too. So it's great.
Thank you. So we had the Horseman groundbreaking, we had the Countryside groundbreaking. In the fall, we're anticipating we'll have the Lincoln Elliott ribbon cutting and the groundbreaking for Franklin. So it's a lot.
Two school moves coming up right now, obviously Horseman and 150, Lincoln Elliott. They're just moving about 100 yards away, but still an extensive move to happen.
Okay, well, thank you for the comprehensive report as always. Is there questions from members? Rajiv?
Thank you. I drive past the new Lincoln Elliott every day. It's looking fantastic, and it actually matches the plans that were built. It looks like the rendering, which is great. And Josh has been sharing interior views and videos, which I know has really gotten the community very enthusiastic. So great work there. I have a question that's slightly different because it's not related to the major projects, and this is related to the Williams Playground, where I know we've made an investment in improving some of the accessibility for the playground. I've heard from several parents they've come and spoken here about trying to improve the accessibility, because being ADA compliant is probably the lowest bar. I don't think any manufacturer of playground equipment makes any that's not ADA compliant at this point. Who controls, or who has the responsibility here? Because in multiple emails and conversations with NPS, with Parks and Rec, it's a hot potato. No one wants to actually say, yes, we need to figure this out. So it's been a little painful. It's especially painful for the students who cannot access the playground. But kind of, how does this work? How do we collaborate across various departments to make something happen?
So we're in the middle of that right now. I actually was at Williams today with Parks Commissioner Nicole Banks and Casey and Maura Tynes and the principal, Tony Byers, and one of the teachers from the program, looking at exactly that. So they've actually made some incredible improvements. There's a brand new swing set. They've put in a lot of additional elements. We looked at the surfacing, and that's really one of the challenges, because the surfacing that meets ADA requirements doesn't quite work for the students that are there. So we talked a little bit about what the options are, and when we left, the agreement was that we'd come, again, working collaboratively to try and come up with kind of what our top request would be, to go back and make some improvements and potentially add an element, find out what the costs are, and then see kind of what the other options are and potential funding sources. So we're in conversation, and
that's great to hear. And I think there are good intentions across the board. Everyone wants to support our students, and I'm glad you were on site today. It just has seemed like it's been a merry-go-round. Sorry to you, but where at some point it would be nice to figure out what comes next.
Yeah, and we're working on that. And I just want to also comment on the fact that this is a focused discussion right now, but we are also working together collaboratively to look at all playgrounds and kind of what our guidelines should be for accessibility at all of our playgrounds. So we're sort of turning the attention on the playgrounds and also evolving our thinking about accessibility and inclusive.
No, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Other questions? Yes.
So, not a question for the team here. Apologies, but I just want to uplift and say how supportive I am and how appreciative I am, Rajiv, for you bringing that point up. I feel that we discussed and we had a lot of really poignant parental appeal to this committee to figure out the problem for the Williams, the students in the Reflections program. And through the budgeting process, that sort of got lost. And so I think it's important that we pick that conversation back up. It seems as though you and your team and the superintendent and her team are doing just that. But really to put out a plan and put forward and be deliberate about sharing it, what it looks like, when it'll be implemented, and just being very mindful of the urgency that the families feel around this issue and sharing that urgency on our part. Yeah.
Thank you. Mayor Fuller?
I will gently correct you. We never lost sight of this. We had a very busy budget season, but the team from NPS and Parks and Rec were on this every step of the way.
We have had ongoing conversations.
It's been, and there's also decisions certainly within NPS. So there's lots of playgrounds and how to prioritize them on their side. Ditto with Parks and Rec, which has both obviously school playgrounds, which are heavily used, but also other neighborhood playgrounds, and a ton of discussion about what to prioritize as the next investments.
Wrapping that into CIP discussions for long-term plans for schools and playgrounds. So we've agreed to collaborate, basically, like we brought us. As I actually used the model that we have for transportation. We have the transportation steering group, and we partner with DPW and the planning department, transportation people in the planning department, and essentially we're initiating the same kind of collaboration around playgrounds.
Excellent. Thank you.
Other questions on the facilities update? Okay, well, why don't we move into our secondary school facility and planning study then?
Thank you.
Right. Arrow. Okay, thanks.
So I'm pleased to introduce Gene Raymond. He's with Raymond Design. And so we've got you in the name here, and you're going to present findings on the secondary schools.
Sure. Thank you very much. It's nice to be here. I was thinking when I was sitting in the back, I actually was sitting in this room in 1994 when we looked at the middle school issue and decided to bring Oak Hill back online. So it's kind of a familiar set of buildings to us.
Gene, by the way, is the architect at right now too, for those that are familiar.
So hopefully you like it. So we have, and we sent out a number of slides, kind of given the hour. I want to let you know the last half we can move through fairly quickly, and it's broken up into various components. So I can take a break at the end of each one of those and see if there are any questions, just to give everyone a chance to digest what we have.
And I just want to sort of frame the conversation. We went through the elementary study where we looked at all the elementary schools, looked at the space utilization and building conditions. And this is a very similar structured report. It's many more thousands of square feet. An individual elementary school is, 50 to 80,000 square feet, whereas, one of the high schools is 400,000 square feet. So, and the program and the space programs are very different than an elementary school.
So, would you like me to just start rolling through it? Okay. And what is it, up or
Yeah,
down?
I think.
Give it a shot.
All right. Not moving. That's interesting. Go ahead.
You just move it up and down.
Oh, it's scrolling.
Aha, okay.
I can forward it for you.
All right, so here we go. So we were asked to take a look at 6 different schools, 4 middle schools, 2 high schools, to do space comparisons. And what we're comparing is the space that's in your existing school compared to MSBA guidelines, which you would have to follow if you were constructing a new school. So one thing I want to say about that is sometimes we might say, oh, you have more space or less space than the guidelines would suggest, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily inadequate or the programs don't have enough space to adequately do what they're trying to accomplish. We also, at the middle school level and the high school level, are always interested in the enrollment capacity of the buildings, and are there any issues that would, say to us, boy, you ought to look at putting an addition on or changing some space around. Kind of a spoiler alert, we didn't find that to be an issue. We took a very overview of the sites and the buildings themselves, and we intend to provide a lot more detail on physical plant issues in the final report that we issue. I believe besides the slide deck, you also were issued an appendix which had many, many pages, but each school is broken down with floor plans that we created with color keys showing what spaces are in them, space summaries, which is an MSBA template, which compares their guidelines to what you have now. And then we also had a couple of documents in there about the capacity issues. So I think we just went over the intent of the study, and I want to reiterate, it's a snapshot in time. It's what we saw based on this school year, what spaces were being used for what programs. And obviously, things are going to be very, very fluid, and certain things are going to change going forward. But you will have, and you do have, a lot of data with room square footages and programmatic, programs across the board at the middle school and high school level. Our enrollment capacity, when we took a look at it, was based on 24 students per classroom or lab, so essentially teaching spaces. At the middle school, when we looked at the capacity of each individual school, it was as simple as adding up the number of core classrooms and science labs, and then multiplying that by 24 pupils in each space. At the high school, it gets a little more complicated. Those are very fluid buildings, the way they're used. So the planning method there is to assign 24 students to each teaching station, which could be a classroom, it could be a lab, it could be the black box theater, it could be the natatorium, the gymnasium, anywhere where there's a group of 24 students. So then you look at the entire school, you add up all those spaces, assuming 100% of the time they're being used by 24 students, and that is impossible to schedule. So the planning approach there, which is typical in this industry, is you take 85% of whatever the 100% utilization is, and that gives you some flexibility in how the building's actually scheduled. So the four middle schools, Bigelow's obviously the smallest, Day the largest. And that ranges from 435 at Bigelow to 860 a Day. So there's almost 100% difference. Day has the most classrooms, the most capacity, but it has capacity for even bigger. If you just looked at the cafeteria, the size of the cafeteria, and if you had 3 lunches. The cafeteria at Bigelow is actually, it's the opposite. Instead of, well, the cafeteria is the limiting factor at Bigelow. Bigelow has a lot more capacity in its rooms than it has in its cafeteria. So if the district were looking for extra capacity, and depending how things flowed throughout the city, you might want to look at how could you expand, and we did take a look at how you could expand Bigelow's cafeteria. So in general, these takeaways, when we're talking about the guidelines, again, it's just the guidelines. It's not necessarily a statement about whether things are good or bad as far as the programs being run. Special education space across the middle schools is not bad. There's a lot of it. There's adequate at Oak Hill, but at Bigelow, it's about 46% below what you might expect if it was a brand new building of that capacity. The general classrooms across the board are within 10% of MSBA guidelines. So we'd say those are in good shape. Science labs, especially at Brown and Oak Hill, are a little bit undersized, Brown and Oak Hill being closer to 40% undersized. Art and music typically exceed the guidelines. Technology is great. Oak Hill probably the smallest technology. PE space is within guidelines. Oak Hill a little bit under. And the media centers, they're all pretty much undersized, but especially at Day because of its large enrollment, MSBA would expect it to have a large library. So for the high schools, both Newton North and Newton South, that was very interesting to us. They have very similar enrollment capacity, even though there's a difference in how many students attend each building. But they have almost the same exact number of classrooms, and the square footage devoted to core academic classrooms and science is almost the same. The classrooms, again, they're within 10% of guidelines. They're a little undersized, but I'd say they're probably functioning just fine. And again, like the middle schools, the science labs are a little bit undersized, 22% at Newton North and 33% at Newton South. So when you see something like this, it might just, trigger a thought saying, oh, let's take a look and talk to some people and see if everything's okay, with those. The media center at North, 16% undersized, and South is at guidelines or a little above. And then what we were also a little surprised about, given that North has the SOE and the swimming pool and a big gym and all these wonderful things. It wasn't surprising that both your high schools exceeded MSBA guidelines, but they both were pretty close as far as the square footage that was dedicated to PE. If you took the swimming pool, out of the play. The cafeterias at North and South, South slightly exceeds the guidelines, which is based on 2 lunches. But at North, that cafeteria would be a little bit undersized compared to the guidelines. But the thing that we understand and makes sense to us is that doesn't necessarily mean it's a disaster, because there's the open campus policy, and there are a lot of students that take advantage of that during lunches. So, and I can get into the space comparisons, if that's okay, if you're still awake. Or I can pause.
Quick question, just back to the cafeteria is,
Sure.
the one at North is a rectangular-ish space, all on one level. The one at South has an unusual layout.
Yeah, it's tiered.
Right,
Yeah.
tiered and kind of somewhat different in terms of how it's used or how it can be used. Did that factor into the assessment, or was it of like what's the square footage, what's the preparation area, and
It was just literally the square footage. So we didn't get into how the spaces might be used for other activities.
Okay, thank you.
So for looking at the space of your secondary schools, this is using Bigelow as an example. And again, this is all something that the school department will have access to. We put all of your buildings into computerized drafting programs. And whether it was the existing building built back in the 60s or an addition or modulars, so the school department will be left with a really good planning, tool. We also, these color codes that you see are the space uses that are outlined in the MSBA guidelines. And that's as of this current school year. So dark blue is core classrooms, and anytime you see green, it's going to be special ed, et cetera, et cetera.
Green is the arts, right?
Oh, the arts, I'm sorry.
Well, I think it's special.
Thank you. I'm used to doing green, but you guys use purple.
Yes, we use purple. That's been our standard, but I do also want to note that in doing the MSBA school building survey, the information that RDA collected, as well as the information that Perkins collected, was instrumental in making that whole process go much more quickly and smoothly. So I was very grateful for that.
Good. So I think we can just go to the next slide. Bigelow in this case is a 3-story building, and you can see the gym has its own color, and the auditorium and the cafeteria is in orange there. And the blue, again, general classrooms. So the 3rd floor, obviously mostly general classrooms. You can see you didn't see a lot of purple at Bigelow, and that kind of corresponds to our statement that there wasn't a lot of special ed space at Bigelow compared to what MSBA would expect. With special ed, you don't have to do what MSBA has in their guidelines. It's really driven by the program in the district. So after we drew all the rooms, we took the square footage of all the rooms, and then we fill in this multi-page MSBA space summary. And if you've ever worked with it, what you do is you start at the bottom and you plug in simply the number of students they're in, and then it calculates what it thinks the size of your library should be, the size of your cafeteria should be, the number of classrooms you should have, and the overall square footage that the building should target if it were a new building. And obviously, we're dealing with all existing buildings. So then we populated, again, this multi-page document. And at Bigelow, again, this data is all in the final report or the appendix, and it's all in the hands of the school department. But I'm just going to run through what we highlighted with this red oval. We were able to compare the square footage of what MSBA guidelines say to what is in this school. And in yellow there, you can see that, well, you probably can't, but I'll read it. There's one classroom that's more than 30% under guidelines. There's 24 classrooms total. There's 15 that are only 10%. They're within 10% of guidelines, and there's 2 that are above. So for the most part, we'd say Bigelow's in good shape as far as, some are under the guidelines, but they're pretty darn close. Then here on the science labs, there are 5. 3 of them are between 20 and 30% under the guidelines, and 2 are between 10 and 20% under the guidelines. So that kind of cycles back to where we were at the beginning, saying science labs or something you might want to just take a look at, see if they're working for the district. I assume they are, because it's a fabulous, district with great results. But that's how they compare to guidelines. So this is kind of an interesting chart. It's a nice summary. It has all 4 of the middle schools, Bigelow, Brown, Day, and Oak Hill, from left to right. And what it shows is how the spaces and the categories in those schools compare to MSBA space guidelines. So anything in purple is within 10% of the guidelines. Anything in green, the space is greater than the guidelines. So green is wonderful. And then there's a couple of shades of red, and the darker of the reds is anything 30% or greater under the guidelines. So you can see across the board, the science labs, again, we just identified that they're smaller than guidelines. You can see special ed at Bigelow is, again, under the guideline. Vocations and technology is really kind of more an issue at Oak Hill than the others. And PE and health at Oak Hill is also a little more undersized. And then the media centers everywhere except Bigelow are lower than guidelines. Then we took a look at things that weren't necessarily teaching spaces. The cafeterias everywhere except Day are below guidelines. And then there's things like the school nurse, the administrative areas, or the custodial and maintenance, that we're not surprised, given the age of the buildings, that these are all under the guidelines. But again, I just want to emphasize that doesn't mean they're not working, So that's okay. I was just going to say that the net square feet, which is how much, if you add up all the program space, the net square footage of all 4 middle schools is above what MSBA would expect, which is a good sign and means you have some flexibility in moving things around, I believe. And the same is true for the gross square footage, the overall square footage of your middle school. So given the enrollments you have, I'd say you have enough space. You want to take a look at some of the programs perhaps, and just see how they're working. So for north and south, this is a little bit repetitive, but so I won't repeat it except to say we added up all the spaces, and we assigned 24 students to each of the teaching spaces. And at the bottom line, we came up with the gross square footage. We did the same analysis as far as program space, gross square footage space, et cetera. And we only have 2 columns, Newton North on the left and Newton South. Your classroom spaces are all within 10% of guidelines. Again, the science labs are a little bit undersized, more so at South than at North. Special ed is either exceeds or just within 10%. Arts, technology, PE, and auditorium drama, they all exceed the guidelines, which is wonderful. The media center is a little bit smaller at North, but really those 2 schools appear to be in pretty good shape. Just take a look at the science labs again and make sure they're working for you. I think this is a repeat, which is in there by mistake. So dining and food service, which is the cafeteria, It is undersized at North. Again, there's the open campus. The nurse is undersized at both. But everything else, just seems like it's above guidelines and in good shape.
I would just point out that the undersized at the cafeterias is the MSBA number for each cafeteria is based on 2 lunch periods. And you'll see as we move forward, capacity is really calculated based on 3 lunch periods.
So I don't know, does anyone have any questions or thoughts on just the overall space sizes? Good. All right, so the capacity at the middle, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just to amuse you a little bit, or amuse us a little bit. There's so many things to learn, of course. I appreciate that, your summary. And one thing I learned, which I did not learn well, is when you look at the school space, normally you look at classroom space, overall space, but I would not think of cafeteria. It's critical because you have a lot of classroom spaces, but the cafeteria is small. That's interesting point.
Yes. So when Stephanie started to touch on it, the MSBA guidelines are based on the school seating half the enrollment in 2 lunches. And the reason they do that is so if you do have an enrollment bump in the future, you don't have to make your cafeteria larger. You could just add another lunch. You could go to 3 lunches, which is what you currently run. Okay. So when we say they're undersized, that's that's one factor. They can be a limiting because we calculated the square footage of the cafeteria. We gave every student 15 square feet, which is building code and MSBA guidelines. And then we come up with how many students could you fit in 1 lunch. So you are only running 3 lunches. So then we multiplied that by 3, and that became the capacity of your cafeteria. So in some cases, that's lower than the capacity of all your classrooms. And at that point, you can take a look at adding on to the cafeteria. And we know that we can do it everywhere. Oak Hill's a little challenging, or you could add a 4th lunch, which would be a policy issue does that make sense?
Well, certainly, a lot of things to learn. I appreciate that. Quickly here, last year, the grossing factor, compared to Newton North and Newton South, 1.71 for Newton North, and 1.54 for Newton South. I'm just curious, grossing factor, so you put everything together, come up with a percentage? How do I understand that?
You take all the program space, classrooms, gymnasiums, media center, cafeteria, anything where there could be students, the office, the main office, so it could include staff areas too. That's the net square footage. And then there are other things like walls and bathrooms and hallways and boiler rooms. So you take the net square footage and you multiply it in that case by 1.5, and that becomes the gross square footage. Or you could do it, obviously, start with the gross, add up the program space and come up with that factor. MSBA expects all their new buildings, and it happens to be at 1.5 or less. Now, I want to tell you that at Newton North, we wrote 1.71, but we had an error in that we thought the small basement, well, we didn't think it, but we took off the whole footprint of the first. We had too much square footage that actually doesn't exist. So the Newton North grossing factor is actually 1.5. It is.
Okay, that's interesting.
Which
Okay.
which is
Yeah.
what we would expect, given that it's 15 years old. So it's much more in keeping with current standards.
I guess that's most people probably expect that, considering Newton North is newer than
Yes.
Newton South, and if the grossing factor is less positive. Lastly, quickly, just to compare with the other district schools, our current facility situation, you think on par with most of schools, or we are better?
I might turn it over to Stephanie because we didn't look at the elementaries.
Are you talking about the elementaries or are you talking about the other districts?
Well, I'm talking about, compared with other districts, say middle school to middle schools, just ballpark, just some.
I think you're in great shape, honestly. I think these facilities and the programs you're running are in really good shape. I was really impressed with the breadth of the spaces because we had to itemize every single use within your buildings. And I was just, we work all over the state. We work in, challenging districts and districts, of all different types. And I was really, really impressed with where you are. Now, on a facility wise, I think the buildings are really well maintained. Various ones have certain things that you want to take a look at from a facility standpoint, but overall, I didn't walk away with any alarm bells on the high schools or on the middle schools.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
The science labs definitely are undersized and so certainly at Newton South have less facilities than typical in newer science labs.
Thanks. So we're not talking about elementary schools. We're talking
No,
middle
only
schools.
secondary
Yeah.
schools.
Thanks. Chris, I'm all set.
Anyone else? So the capacity I touched on, it's really as simple at the middle school of adding up the number of general classrooms or science labs and assigning 24 students. So just using Bigelow as this example, we came up based on the number of teaching stations, we came up with a capacity of 696. That's going to be, you're going to see that the cafeteria had, if you base it on 3 lunches in the cafeteria, that comes down to 465. So in this case, based on the small size of the cafeteria, we'd set the enrollment at 465 instead of the previous numbers 696. Okay? So I'm not sure, I don't think you have a capacity issue here, but if you did, you could take a look at, how do you get to the next slide? You could take a look at adding on to the cafeteria. So in the green boxes in the left column under Bigelow, we think you could add 230 seats to the cafeteria if you just put a small addition, and there's a little nook outside the cafeteria where you could just put an addition. We'll show it to you. The other thing you could look at is just changing the use. You have a program, a special ed program in there called CAPS. I believe it's a collaborative. So that happens, there's 3 rooms that are next to the cafeteria. You could say, we don't have room for that, and you could expand your cafeteria there. So that's one way that you could take your capacity from 465 to 696, because the classrooms and labs have a capacity of 696. So again, I don't know that you have a capacity issue at the middle school or high school level, but that's an example of how you can use some of this data.
Or the other alternative is going to 4 lunches.
Yeah. We didn't think Brown was pretty close between classrooms and cafeteria. What is it, 948 versus 984? So it doesn't make sense to put an addition on the cafeteria. Day, the cafeteria has a capacity of 1,152. 1,200, and your classrooms are 1,152. So those are in pretty good alignment. And if you wanted to increase capacity a day, you'd be looking at trying to raise the number of classrooms, but that's a very tight site, and I don't see that happening. And then Oak Hill, it's 824 based on the cafeteria. Your classrooms would tell us, you could get 912 students in there. But when we looked at expanding the cafeteria at Oak Hill, the only place to do it is in a little nook between the classroom wing and the gym wing, and you'd end up blocking up windows in a couple classrooms. So we don't think putting an addition on the cafeteria and raising that enrollment capacity makes sense. So if you ever did have an issue, I would take a look at Bigelow. It seems to be the easiest place to add capacity.
And this is 100% capacity.
Yes, based on 24 kids in each classroom. So that's a good point. That may not.
You wouldn't want to plan for 100% occupancy. That's the upper limit.
Okay. And then, one of the ways this data can be used is just, as I mentioned, we had a diagram in there showing where you could add to the Bigelow CAF. So there's that little, we'll just move along. So the high school, remember the capacity calculations at the high school are done differently. So what we do is put 24 students in every teaching space. If you have a 2-station gym, there's 48 students. We know the pool is a scheduled class. So we put 24 at North into the pool, for example. So the total number of students that you could fit in North, if every space was used with a maximum number of students, 100% of the time, is 2,574 pupils. As I said, that is not a planning number. It's impossible to achieve. So in number 1 there in the green, the typical planning number is 85%. Plan on the usage being 85%, whether it's the number of kids being smaller or the number of spaces, having open periods. So that is 2,188 students, which is pretty close. It's about 100 more than your existing enrollment of 2,095. Then we compared the classroom capacity to number 2, cafeteria capacity, and with 3 lunches in blue there, it's 793 students. So that's, what kind of triggers us saying, oh, the cafeteria might be the limiting issue at North for capacity. But again, there's the open campus, so a lot of kids leave for lunch. If that policy changed in the future, we did look, and it's very easy to put an addition out toward the turf field and the running track and not impact really any of the sidewalks or anything. And I would use 2188 plus or minus as a maximum, enrollment planning number. At South, it was based, the capacity at 85% is pretty close, 2168. That was one of the surprising things to us. They almost had the same number of classrooms and labs. And in this case, the cafeteria at South, again, would suggest we limit the capacity if you had 3 lunches to 2,004 students. And again, we looked at if you had to expand that cafeteria capacity, there is space to go out to the north with an addition into one of the courtyards. I don't know if we have to keep pounding on that, but we put a couple of tables in there, just that combined your existing enrollment at both high schools is 3,995, so let's say 4,000 pupils. Your capacity is about 3,800, so you're right there. And there's various ways that you could expand capacity. And if you maxed out things, you could probably get up to 4,600 students at the high school level just by increasing the size of the cafeterias. I don't think you'll ever get there, but. So I don't know if anyone has any questions or you had any other thoughts?
I would just add the way, this is based on the way the building is used now and the special education spaces. This is talking most specifically about the core academic spaces. So the special education spaces, there's a few that are dedicated spaces. So again, how that is used is flexible. So this is kind of a range right now, snapshot in time, but it's a good reference.
Now I'm going to go really quick because your sites and buildings are in pretty darn good shape. And this is the last half of, 30 slides, but we can kind of fly through them. I don't know how to change it.
Oh, here,
so.
I'll go.
So.
And there's some other building condition information that needs to be added. So a little bit more detail that we haven't grasped here.
We have it, we just haven't gotten it into this deck. So, this slide was in your packet. It has the date of construction of the original school across all 6 schools. And then it has the date of any renovations or additions or modular classrooms, like Brown and Oak Hill have modulars. Newton South has some modulars that are not used, but modulars are shown in red. I think we can go to the next one. We have the site sizes, probably not surprising anyone. Bigelow is the smallest at 3 acres. And then Newton North is 24 acres and Newton South is even bigger, 33. That's good. We can go to the next one. So then, we always look at site topography because sometimes that triggers us thinking about ADA issues. And for the most part, I'm going to say that the schools are in good shape from an ADA slope perspective. I'll show you at Brown, there is one sidewalk that goes up from the roundabout and goes up toward the front door, and that is very steep and probably should turn into a switchback if you wanted to provide, true ADA access.
Bigelow is a pretty steep site, but
Bigelow's pretty steep, and there's some places we've identified where the ground is sloping toward the building. So if there's rain, it's going to run toward the building. But we didn't notice anything as far as puddling or I think the drainage there works, believe it or not. So then site regulations. Day, it's a small site. It has it's got the park next to it, which it uses for recreation and bus drop off. But there's also restricted area that's Avery Woods. And so Day's just very hard to expand. And Newton South, it's got a road that kind of runs through it. The tennis court's on one side of the road from the school. It also has a lot of green area, but there is a pretty big wetland area that gets taken out of Newton South, even though I have to say it's got amazing athletic facilities, as does North. So I'm not sure you need any more site area there. Bigelow, when we get to it, that's a small site. The school takes up most of it. The parking takes up the rest, and they use a park across the street. I think it's Burr, yeah. And there is a challenge at Bigelow because the students go down the sidewalk, they cross the street, and then they get to a stairway that probably has 10 steps. And there really should be, you should think about providing ADA access up to Burr Park if that's going to be the playground. So I don't know, let's see, existing spaces. Oh, so then we just went school by school. So in your appendix, you'll find all the floor plans. You'll find something like this that shows the site from the satellite view, and also a drawing view where we've identified that access ramps at Burr Park should be used. We've identified where buses drop off, where vans drop off, and parents drop off. So it's really more informational, and what we came away there is, because of the slope site, really, there's probably some ADA issues. I think I've talked about all this. The building condition, Bigelow surprised me almost the most of all the schools. The ceiling heights in there are tall. They're light. There's a lot of natural light that spills into that building. It's very bright and pleasant to be in. It also, all the walls are concrete block walls that are painted, which sounds horrible, but they're not, it's not. So everything's durable, the ceiling heights are high, and again, it's just a very pleasant atmosphere to be in. We didn't see anything in Bigelow that just stuck out as far as, oh, you really need to address it from a physical plant standpoint. At Brown, again, we've identified the typical bus, parent, van drop-off. Parking is an issue at Brown right now. There's kind of double stacked parking that goes into the back onto the grass in the back. And then they share some of the parking lot on Wheeler Road with Oak Hill. So I'd say parking at Brown is clearly an issue, and maybe there's a better way to have it be organized. Again, we did all the floor plans, which people have access to, and it doesn't show here as well, but getting on the picture on the upper right, on the right-hand side, the street is well down from the front door, which is on the left. And there's a sidewalk that pretty much just goes straight up the slope. And again, I think that needs to be modulated and turned into a switchback walk of some sort, just so it's easier for someone with mobility issues to do. The service area at Brown is over on the far left side. If you're looking at the front of the school, the paving is kind of a disaster and all rutted. And should really that needs to be redone. And the parking, like I said, is kind of a mess in the back. The interior Brown, it's well maintained, but I guess I would say it's tired, quote unquote. There's it could really use some sprucing up. There's not a lot of natural light in it. I would say the cafeteria is really nice and has an outdoor area, but I think Brown, we could spend a little more time taking a look at the inside of that. And then Day, obviously a congested site. On the right-hand side, there's a green dashed arrow, so there's they go pretty far to go to the play fields, but then the buses are out on the road there by the pool. So it works, and it works well. It's just interesting how the site's laid out, and it's all probably because of Avery Woods, and really the site can't expand that way. Yeah, please do. The site was in great shape. The front door is easy to find. Parking, obviously a challenge, especially for visitors like myself. But the paving walks, they were all in good shape. Everything was fully accessible. So, and then inside the building, again, it was in really good shape.
And we have additional information about sort of infrastructure, electrical, mechanical, that'll be added.
And then Oak Hill. Oak Hill was actually interesting because most of the issues on Oak Hill, and I think we'll write a specific write-up on this. Most of the issues involve the outside condition of the building. There's a lot of wood trim because it's a 1932 building, big, thick window casings and frames, and there's a lot of rot. And there's actually birds that have kind of gotten themselves into creating nests inside the windowsills, which is I've never seen before. There's a lot of downspouts and gutters. The gutters they're going to need to be maintained on a more regular basis because a lot of water is just spilling down the brick. You can see a lot of staining, and a lot of the downspouts themselves have kind of fallen away. So I would take a look at the exterior on Oak Hill. And then on the lower left of the photographs, you can see a bunch of sandbags in front of some steps leading down to the ground floor. This is really simple to solve, but the site is actually pitching down toward that stairway. And in a heavy rain event, water was actually getting down into the lower level. So I think we can do something better than the sandbags. But overall, the site at Oak Hill is in great shape. It's flat. There's lots of play fields. I think it's really mostly the building envelope. So. And Newton North, 15 years old. Everything's in great shape.
At a very high level. We'll get into more.
It really isn't, yeah.
Through the.
And then Newton South, I can just tell it's getting old. Getting late. So again, Newton South, the site's in great shape. That school's benefited from a series of additions between the field house and the classrooms and the science labs. And I guess my impression of that building is it's kind of sprawls, and you gotta kind of figure out where you are within the plan, but everything's tied together well. The interiors are very pleasant. The cafeteria is fabulous. Media center is fabulous. So we didn't see a lot. We just didn't see a lot that really was in disrepair at South either. And I'll stop.
Or infrastructure pieces that will be added.
So I'll just stop talking at that point.
Okay, thank you for that extensive presentation. Questions from the members? Emily?
Hi, Jean, thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome. Sorry it's so long.
No, for me, it's fine. I got no problems with it. So I just want to say just two quick things. One about Brown, which is, I think, tired is a very gentle way of putting it. I personally feel that there's something sort of, I don't know, supremely institutional about it, with not a lot of light and not a lot of windows, which you definitely nailed when you were discussing. So I would push back a little bit on the fact that everything's hunky-dory, because I feel like Brown definitely has quite a number of things that need to be improved, I would say. So that's one. And two is, did you not see the mice or the leaks at Newton South?
The roof.
I
is in
did.
need. Yes.
We
So
saw.
that's the layer.
Okay,
We
good.
have another layer.
Yeah,
of
I was wondering about
information
that.
we
It
do have.
Probably would
Yes.
have been too much for tonight, but I'm just.
Yes, getting into the
Yeah,
details.
because it's an amazing facility, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely has some things that need to be improved. And I would also say, whoever decided to dump a California based school in the middle of Massachusetts, I don't know what they were thinking, really, honestly.
It's incredibly spread out.
Yes, it is.
I think what surprised us in doing the analysis of just the comparison to the space standards and from Newton North to Newton South is actually, they're not that different when you just look at the numbers of spaces. Clearly, the layout is very different. South has a number of infrastructure issues. And certainly the science labs are a big piece of that. The roof,
Has been
there's
for years. Yeah.
there's mechanical issues as well. So that layer of information is
Great.
not quite here.
Thank you.
It does have an amazing courtyard.
It does. Hard to maintain, but yes.
I saw so much activity, and it's really, really stunning.
You should see them do Shakespeare in that area.
I can imagine it. I can imagine it. And I did not hear about mice, so I'll have to chit chat with you about that.
Yeah, no, there's definitely other issues.
Thank you so much.
Other questions for Chief?
It's a much smaller program, but are you planning to look at community connections at all
Is Community Connections
in the annex here?
the annex here? This study did not include the Ed Center.
Okay.
So we don't have any, we haven't gathered that information.
It could certainly use some TLC, which is why I bring it up, but I guess if that's separately, I don't know if it's anywhere on the CIP.
Yeah, the annex spaces, which are the two buildings that are outside, they're I think block buildings. They were not part of this, but just again, we're doing the 4 major schools. So that's something that we can look at. The Ed Center, I think in total, this kind of number of issues, I think that we're aware of that certainly as well.
All right. In terms of the long-range planning, even just the move of Springboard out of this building into, is it going into both North and Newton South? Okay, so even that will impact this, but so everything's always, there's flexibility and things are fluid. There's sort of the core that stays the same and it sort of shifts, and tweaks each year. But we'll need to, as we're looking at long-range planning and figuring out what should be in the CIP and what should be the next large building project or the next medium-sized building project or small building project, we'll take all that data into consideration. So and then it sort of makes sense to come back and look at the Ed Center as well, because there are programs still here.
Community Connections until last year was broken out between North and the Ed Center. It's now consolidated into the Ed Center, so using some space in this building and then one of the annex buildings, I think, not both. So again, it's very much a World War II barracks kind of structure, which could be improved.
Makes sense.
Other questions? Oh, Tamika.
So, thank you for putting this all together, and Liam and Stephanie as well. Thank you for assisting Jean to make sure we have this really good comprehensive report. I think one of the values of having something like this is that now we have a beyond subjective, an objective analysis of the secondary schools, the spaces, and whether they're working well with the programs. And so, Stephanie, when you were talking about how it will assist us in deciding where the priorities and when are they coming, I would say it also has utility for something like our strategic planning process, where we're thinking about having CTE classes, and then we have to ask the question, well, do we have enough science lab space and science spaces to support that? If we take from our existing cadre of available spaces for something else, we're going to have trade-offs. And so, I think, again, it's giving you that very clear-cut, objective, like stripped bare look at the what we have available to us and helping us to make those decisions more effectively. So I think it's a good thing that we've done this, and I'm really excited to see how and when and where we use it. And I can only say it's probably going to be a lot.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of data, a huge amount of data exactly that, as we look at the long-range plan, tying into the strategic plan, tying into any, structuring of special education programs. It's giving us a lot of good information. We've already used it.
And it's giving you that window into the punch list of things, the priority that we need to look at. I think Brown issues are known, though this kind of puts them in again, that kind of objective list of where do we need to put our resources and at what time, and which ones rise to the top in that level of priority. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Questions?
Your thoughts? Okay, well, thank you very much for the presentation.
Yeah.
Much appreciated. We'll look forward to the further details to come.
Great, you're all welcome.
Okay, that concludes our agenda for this evening, and we are adjourned.